Good evening, everybody. Happy Thursday to y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Truth Defender podcast. We are coming to you from the greatest country in the world, as always, the great Republic of Texas, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas, to be more specific. If you aren't already a subscriber, appreciate it if you guys go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. That'd really help us out, as well as hitting that like button, that bell icon as well, so you don't miss an episode in the future when we actually do go live. It's been a while, and we had a couple of shows that were up and running, supposed to be up and running a while back, and those kind of fell through last minute. So was quite unfortunate, but we're rocking and rolling again out here in February. I think we're in February, right? Yeah. So the end of February, going into March. So we'll be going pretty heavy with shows from now on. Yeah, if you guys are on the go and you want to check us out, you can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. If you guys love what we do here on the show and you're feeling generous, please consider sharing the show with a friend, family member, or colleague. That would really help us out as well. Questions for myself, our guests, as well as guest or topic recommendations, you can go ahead and shoot us an email, as always, at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. You want to follow us on social media, you can find us on X, Kick, Instagram, Rumble. No more Facebook. That was nuked a while back, so we don't have that anymore. All at the Truth Defender Podcast or at Truth Defender Podcast. As always, we like to thank our affiliate, Spiritual Awakening International. Spiritual Awakening International is a nonprofit worldwide network of individuals and groups interested in collaborating to raise awareness, network, and share personal experience relating to spirituality, transformative experiences, and spiritual awakening of all kind. It's also there to raise global spiritual awareness. Dr. Yvonne Kaysan is president and founder of Spiritual Awakening International. She's a family physician and transpersonal MD. Psychotherapist, previously on faculty at the University of Toronto. Also, her owner or co-creator as well, Robert Baer, PhD, vice president and founder of Spiritual Awakenings International as well. Former employment included working for the Santa Cruz Police Department and then joining the California Highway Patrol from 1970 to 1992. So we really appreciate them bringing us on board, becoming an affiliate with them as well. So if you guys have any information, you go ahead and jump out there to spiritualawakeninginternational.com. We have the links down in the show notes as well. And you can find that in the link tree to all of our platforms. Links can be found on there as well. Back rocking and rolling. A lot has been going on since the last time we jumped on a show. The world seems to kind of exploded here over the last month or so. So we're actually going to be bringing back a few guests to kind of speak on things. We have the whole UFO disclosure thing coming out, which I'm kind of iffy about. I'm not too sure if that's is legit or that's just kind of a big distraction from everything that's been going on lately. I lean more towards that we're just kind of been giving that just to kind of throw us off and get us off, what's been going on in the world lately. Everything from, Venezuela to now what's going on in Iran, Epstein files, obviously, and just all kinds of craziness. So I don't know. We'll see what we make of it, but there's a lot going on and we're trying to get ahead of the curve on that. But for today, I have a very interesting guest and something that I've been kind of interested in for a while. Obviously, we all kind of have the same questions. What happens in the afterlife after we're gone? Do we actually disappear from here? We're a ball of energy, so our body might be gone, but our energy lives on. And, what happens to that when it's gone from here? Do we actually leave, go to heaven or not? What actually ends up happening to us? So our next guest is Mr. Jeremy Spillane. He is a speaker and first-time author from East Yorkshire, UK. He's actually staying up for us tonight, pretty late out there, 1 a.m. So we really appreciate that. Husband to Caroline of 42 years, 5 children, 6 grandchildren. Jeremy's life took a dramatic turn after the deaths of his in-laws, Joan and Roger. What followed was a 2-year journey of documented spirit communication using SLS cameras, K2 meters, and digital dowsers. Jeremy's calm, articulate style and educator's mindset make him a compelling voice in the world of spiritual inquiry and paranormal research. So without further ado, Mr. Jeremy Spillane. How you doing, sir?
Hi, Paul. Lovely to be here chatting to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I do appreciate you staying up with us. I know it's quite late out there, so we really appreciate you staying up on a Thursday evening, Friday morning
No
for you.
That's it. Absolutely. Early Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I mean, like you kind of obviously you heard here on the intro, for a lot of people, myself included, it's a common question that we've obviously had since the beginning of time. What actually happens to us once we're gone? Obviously, we're all made up of energy, so energy, never dissipates, never goes away. It just kind of transforms into something else. But for a lot of people that on the spiritual side of things, maybe other people who are not, they always wonder as well, what happens when we die? Now, before you actually kind of took up this investigative work, kind of explain a bit about what you were up to prior to that. Did you have any kind of thoughts about the afterlife? What was your kind of general sense about everything? What happens after we die and all that?
Yeah. Well, I was sort of in my late 50s, really, and I'd been brought up a Catholic as a child. And when I sort of became a teenager, I stopped going to church. My dad was Catholic, and he brought my two elder brothers and me up as Catholics. We went to church each week, but we each stopped going. Each of the sons stopped going to church when we were teenagers, and for me, I stopped believing in all the teachings of the Catholic Church. I didn't believe in an afterlife anymore. I just couldn't believe it because it just seemed too incredible to be true. I still believe there must be a God who created everything. That the universe just seems so complicated that it couldn't be some sort of accident, as some people think. But life after death, that just seemed a bit preposterous. And I spent the rest of my life, really, the next few decades, not thinking that the afterlife was possible or true. I was still open to evidence, and had I seen something that convinced me, I could have believed it, but I never did. And so I met my wife Caroline when we were both 17, and I'm now 65. So quite a while ago, and we've been married over 40 years, as you say, got all the children. And Caroline and I, had been to a number of family funerals over the years. We'd never experienced anything that gave me a hint that there was an afterlife. No relative or friend had ever given us any signs that there was anything once they'd gone. That was that. So I still believe that there wasn't an afterlife. And my in-laws, Joan and Roger, I knew them both really well. They were like a second set of parents to me. And Roger, well, in fact, they had met. They were both Christians when they first met. They were Jehovah's Witnesses. They met through their church. They got married. They had two daughters. Caroline, my wife, is the elder daughter. Alison's a couple of years younger. And when they had the two girls, then they were busy with the children and jobs and stuff, and they stopped going to their church. And Roger, he stopped believing in all the teachings that he had as a Christian. So whenever I spoke to him about this subject, he always said, "No, there's no such thing as the afterlife. Once you're dead, you're dead. That's the end." And he lived his life on that basis. And right up until the end, if ever I brought the subject up, he didn't talk a lot about it, but he would say, no, that's it. You die and then you're gone. So he was trying to cram everything into his life, before he died, had all plans. He was a very active chap, had all sorts of things. He was really well educated. He was an Oxford University graduate. He'd been a teacher his first few years of life. And into later career, moved on to other things. And education, knowledge, and books were really his main things in life. He was a book fanatic. He had hundreds or maybe thousands of books, I'm not sure, on all different subjects. And after he died, actually, we did see that he had books on various religions. So I think he was still open-minded. He was still looking for evidence of life after death, but he didn't seem to have found it. So when he died, then he was a non-believer in the afterlife. So, as I say, we'd have family funerals, no signs of anything, and then in 2017, Caroline's mum, Joan, she died suddenly without warning. She had a heart condition, but she never made much of her health issues. And we just, everyone, I think Roger included and all the rest of us, I think we'd assumed Roger would die first because he had had a long list of medical problems throughout his life, and he'd always got through them. He had a triple heart bypass, probably 2 or 3 decades before he died, and he'd got through that. So when Joan died suddenly with no warning, it was a massive shock to all of us. Joan and Roger were sat in their living room in their house in East Yorkshire, and Joan was just getting up out of her chair when she collapsed on the floor and instantly died and didn't have time to say goodbye. The ambulance was called, and they came very quickly, luckily, and there was obviously nothing they could do. She'd gone, and that was that. So Roger rang Caroline and said, I think Mum's gone. And Caroline didn't understand what he was saying initially, but then she realised. So we rushed over. At this time, we were living about 30 miles away from them. We rushed over, and sure enough, Joan was dead on the floor, and we stayed with her, for the next couple of hours while the ambulance people were around, and the police had to be called because it was a sudden death. But of course, it was just one of those health issues that happens. Anyway, within, a day or two, literally, of Joan dying, then suddenly Karen and I were getting signs at our house that we thought they were signs from Joan that she was still around. So we had things like televisions in our house turning on by themselves and lights turning on. And we had several televisions throughout the house, and it wasn't just one television turning on, that you could explain as being a faulty television maybe, but any television in our house would turn on by itself. And sometimes we'd walk in a room and television would turn on as we entered the room. But we had the one in our bedroom turn on in the night, and our bedside light would turn on. We were fast asleep perhaps, and suddenly the thing would turn on and wake us up. And we straight away realised it was Joan, and we loved the signs. We thought, blimey, that's amazing. And we'd speak to Joan and say, thanks for doing that. And after a while, we were losing sleep, and we said, it's great, but we could do with you not waking us up each night. We do need the sleep, but we still love the signs. Anyway, we told Roger about these, what we thought were signs from Joan, and because he didn't believe in the afterlife, he was dumbfounded. He didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say to us. He thought we were just complete cases, and so eventually we stopped talking to him about these signs. We're pretty sure that Roger wasn't getting any signs, because I'm pretty confident he would have said something or hinted if he had have been. So as far as we know, it was just Caroline and I who got the signs at our house. And Caroline's sister Alison, as far as we know, she didn't get any signs, we don't think. And obviously we told her, but again, she was skeptical. I don't know what her beliefs were really regarding afterlife, but I'm not sure that she did believe in one. So anyway, this happened, and we were amazed. And my favourite sign from Joan actually was doing something with wildlife, which has done a few things, butterflies and other things. But my favourite one was, it was 3 days or 4 days, something like that, after she'd died. We were walking around a local ancient castle near where we lived in West Yorkshire. And the castle is surrounded by a big earth mound, covered in grass, quite a steep slope all around the castle. And we were walking on the top of this mound with our pet spaniel, Poppy, who's featured in the book that I went on to write. And we're walking around, Caroline, me and the dog, walking around the top of this mound. And partway down the slope, there's a smallish tree. And in the tree, I can see a bird of prey. And I've always loved birds and got a reasonable knowledge. So I said to Caroline, I'm just going to walk towards that bird in the tree and see exactly what type of bird it is. And as I walked towards it, this kestrel, which is a small bird of prey about the size of a pigeon or something, it flew out of the tree towards the three of us, and it circled us twice at low level, quite tight circles, and then flew back to the tree. And I was just amazed. It's not the normal behavior of a wild bird. And, I was certain that was Joan, as we both were. We were both certain it was Joan. Some people have said to us, a bird of prey, could it have been eyeing up our dog, thinking that's going to be its next meal? But our dog was a heavy dog, a medium size. It was 15 kilograms, about 30 odd pounds, so quite heavy. And these birds would only hunt things like little mice, if anything. And the way it circled, it wasn't as if it was in hunting mode. Normally they'd be high up and ready to dive down onto a creature and get it. So it definitely wasn't behaving like a normal bird of prey after its food or anything. So this was definitely a sign from Joan, we're sure. So again, we told Roger about this, and again, just he just wouldn't talk about it. So we, as I say, we didn't say any more to Roger, but we kept getting all sorts of signs from Joan. With Karen smelt her perfume in our house and other things like that. And as I say, we have had various butterfly signs and feathers appearing in strange places, in the house when there's no birds in the house, obviously. So things like that. So this went on for a while, but Karen and I, because of Joan having died, and to help comfort us, because Caroline was distraught with her mother dying, she just found it so hard to deal with, although these signs from Joan, her mum, were reassuring, but even so, it was still devastating, and we were all in shock, I think, to some extent. So Karen and I, we sold up our business we had in Leeds, a food business, and we moved over to be near Roger in East Yorkshire, which is where we are now. So we're just in a town just about 3 or 4 miles from where Joan and Roger lived, and so we moved near to be near Roger, and we basically visited him every day. We moved over to sort of semi-retire. So the business we found quite a bit of a drag, to be honest. It was a bit of a millstone around our neck. So when we moved here to East Yorkshire, we were able to semi-retire, which was lovely. So we had more time to do things that we enjoyed doing, and we would visit Roger each day and see how he was and help him to get through the shock of Joan dying, which he did. He gradually started getting his life back together, and as I said before, he used to live his life to the max, to because he didn't believe in the afterlife. So he started gradually having trips, like little mini holidays, even some by himself and some with a friend who he sort of grew close to, and so he was sort of getting his life back on track, and we were sort of just around and seeing him regularly. So that happened, and then we got COVID, and as obviously the whole world did. So that was a big shock. We had all the really tight rules on what you could and couldn't do, and so very fortunately, Roger didn't get COVID, but he did have his other illnesses that sort of caught up with him the last year or two. And we were visiting regularly, and under the COVID rules, we'd go and see him every day and see if he needed anything. And we were allowed, each person in the country was allowed one bit of daily exercise a day. So we used to take our dog in the car to our local park, give her a nice long walk, and then we'd drive on to Roger, and then we'd be with him, and we would visit. We'd perhaps have a drink with him, and we'd perhaps sneak into the house when we weren't supposed to and have a drink with him. And when the weather's cold, you can't be sat out in the garden, especially with an elderly person, because Roger was in his 80s by now. And in fact, Joan had died. She was 86 when she died, and then 4 years later, Roger died, and he was 86, because Roger was younger than Joan, actually. So anyway, the last year or so of Roger's life, then his illnesses really did catch up with him, and so he ended up, going into and out of hospital quite frequently, and he would be in hospital for many weeks on end, and gradually, we could see his health was failing, and he'd got some very serious health issue that stemmed back 20 or 30 years to a previous operation that was sort of failing, basically. And so his last his last year and especially his last few months were quite hard for him health-wise. But as I say, he was in hospital for a few weeks, then he'd come home, and he was always trying to be home as much as possible. So obviously we did everything we could to help him be at home. But anyway, finally in April 2022, he did die. So this was just over 4 years after Joan died, and Caroline was with him in the hospital. He was in, the last time he was in hospital was for a few days, maybe nearly a week, I can't quite remember. And he'd gone into hospital, and Caroline was visiting him every day, of course, and he was obviously not well at all. Whenever the medics cured one thing, then another problem would rear up. So whenever they sorted one thing out, another one would be the main problem, and they could never sort of balance everything. So what he was just sort of getting quite ill, obviously, and but we didn't see the end coming quite when it did. So Karen got a phone call from the hospital from a nurse and said, you can come down, see your dad now if you want. And she didn't say it's urgent, and Karen didn't really realize that's what she was hinting at. But Karen went down, and then she was with her dad holding his hand. He wasn't talking really by this stage, and he was sort of not properly conscious, but he was slightly conscious, I think. But and he wasn't really looking at Caroline particularly. His eyes didn't seem to be working properly. But Caroline was holding his hand, and he died. So Caroline was the only one with him when he died, and then she rang me and rang her sister, and then Caroline's sister, her husband Colin, and myself, we all went down to the hospital and joined, Caroline and Roger, dead in his bed. So that was the end of that. And even though we sort of knew it was coming, we didn't know it was coming just that day, of course, and we were all quite surprised. And so anyway, we were with Roger, and then obviously we came home, and then actually then within a day or two of his death, similar to Joan, suddenly we Karen and I got loads of signs at our house that Roger was still around. So this was Roger, the big skeptic who didn't believe in life after death, and suddenly we were getting loads of signs from him, and these were different signs to what Joan had given us. There was still there was quite a number of electrical signs with Roger, but different ones to what Joan did. So Roger didn't turn televisions on for us, but he did turn lights on and off in our house, and trip out the power on different circuits. So suddenly a circuit would trip out, and once or twice it tripped the whole power out to the whole house. And so we've got a circuit breaker type fuse box in our living room, and if we were in there, he might trip the power off, and then the circuit tripped out with quite a bang, as it turns off. And so we knew that was Roger, and we had one or two other things, like he would sort of do things on our mobile phone occasionally, sort of give us a sign on there of some sort. And the spirits seem to be able to do things electrically or electronically. It's one of the things that they can do comparatively easily, apparently, and certainly Joan and Roger bear that out. So anyway, Roger had died, and I was going to say the 3 weeks after he died, we went to see a medium who we've seen before. Colin had recommended this medium to us after his dad died some years previously, and Colin knew nothing about this Stephen Holbrook, but he'd seen his advert in the local paper and thought, I ought to go and see him because my dad's died, and he just thought there could be a reason why he ought to see him. So Colin went and had an amazing reading from his dad through this medium, and Colin had recommended Stephen Holbrook to us. So we'd been a number of times to see him, but we'd had no personal messages, but we still went because we could see how people who got messages, how this medium was so amazing. And So 3 weeks after Roger died, we went to see the medium because he was coming locally to us. And even though it was quite soon after Roger had died, we thought we ought to go just in case. So Alison, her husband Colin, my wife Karen, and I, the four of us, we went to see Stephen Holbrook. And amazingly, Roger did come through with an incredible message that was so detailed. It just proved that Roger was around, and it obviously showed that there was life after death, even though Roger had always told us there wasn't. So we got the feeling that all these various signs he was giving and this amazing reading through the medium, it was Roger saying, I was wrong, there is life after death. So some of the messages, or parts of the messages that he gave through Stephen Holbrook were things like, he said that, Roger said through Stephen that he was in the hospital in the bed, and Caroline was there holding his hand. She was the only one with him when he died. Well, that was true. And then he said that the three others of us joined Caroline after he died. That was true. When Roger left his house with the ambulance people the last time, a few days before he died, Roger asked the ambulance people to move 3 new climbing plants he'd got in little pots in his porch. Asked them to move them into the garden so they'd get some rain while he was away in hospital so they didn't die, and that's true. And he was worried about these plants, and we ended up taking them, and now we've got them in our garden. Another thing he said through Stephen Holbrook was when he was buried in his coffin, he had the wrong shoes on. And that's true. So Alison, Roger's younger daughter, she couldn't find the black shoes that he was going to have when he was dressed in his coffin, and she ended up giving him some brown shoes because she thought, they're not going to show. So. But anyway, Roger said he'd got the wrong shoes on. And another thing he said was, I had some books in my coffin, that were put in to keep me company, and that's true. So Caroline and Alison had given him a selection of books which went with him into his coffin. So all these signs just proved that was Roger. So some of the other signs we got from Roger, as I say, they started within a day or two, literally, of him dying. So one of the amazing signs was, I think that was 4 days after he'd died, Karen and I went to the cemetery where Joan was buried, because Roger was going to have his funeral there and join her, in a week or two, whatever, after he'd died. And there were things on her grave that we needed to clear away before the funeral, because obviously they'd been in the way. So one of the main things was a potted plant that was on her grave. It was a rose in a pot. And so we took the wheelbarrow with us because I needed to retrieve this pot and various other bits and pieces. So by this time we'd started filming on our iPhones whenever we went somewhere like the cemetery, because initially Karen couldn't even go to the cemetery after her mum died for a year or more. She was just, the shock of her mum dying had really knocked her back, and she just didn't want to go to the cemetery. She just couldn't face it. But we'd started going to her grave before Roger had died, and by this time Karen was sort of more used to her mum having died. And there was an incident at another cemetery where Joan and Roger weren't buried, and this was our local cemetery in the town where we lived in East Yorkshire, and you were allowed to take dogs to walk them there, and we used to take our dog. And one time we were at this cemetery, and Caroline spotted on someone's grave, don't know whose grave, there was a blackbird just having a bath in the gravestone. The gravestone had little recesses where you'd have the little flowers put in, the cemetery, whatever you call them, little pots of plants on a gravestone. And in this little recess, it was full of water, and this bird was having a bath. And Karen saw this and thought, I'm going to video that, and that looks nice. And she thought she saw a light anomaly in front of this blackbird. So she filmed it, and for a while we thought that was a light anomaly, like a little white orb on the grass. But later we realised it was just actually a stray reflection from a neighbouring grave that was in the camera, and it was just looking like a light anomaly. But whatever the reason, it made us start taking film on our phones whenever we were at Joan and Roger's cemetery or anywhere else where we thought we might see something. And so we'd film, and then we would later, I'd go through the footage and have a look and see if I could see any light anomalies that I thought might be, Roger or Joan possibly, but probably Roger giving us a sign that he was around. And sure enough, within a day or two of Roger dying, when we took footage and then we looked at it later, I would see the odd light anomaly that I thought, yes, I think that is Roger. Like a tiny little dot of light moving unpredictably. So I would rule out it being a reflection or whatever. There were obviously some reflections every now and again. You think, well, that's explainable. That's nothing sort of paranormal, if you like. And it was after Joan died in 2017 that I'd started watching all sorts of programs on the paranormal, ghost hunting. I've been reading dozens, if not hundreds, of books on all different subjects, trying to educate myself in life after death and everything. Because till that point, till Joan died, I hadn't believed in life after death. And as a child, I was scared of ghosts and things like that. I used to have nightmares. My parents would tell me, "Oh, don't worry, there's no such thing as ghosts." And I would try not to think about things of that nature. And I was scared of the dark, so I didn't want to entertain the idea. So that's part of the reason why I never believed in all this sort of thing. But after Joan died, suddenly I was watching everything, and I was fascinated and trying to, see, what's real, what isn't real. And I came to the conclusion quite quickly that there really is life after death. And some of these bits of paranormal footage on television and on various videos, I think, are genuine. And I was seeing what sort of equipment ghost hunters use. And although I didn't like all these ghost hunting programs where they're searching at night in the dark, and it's all a bit scary and a bit gimmicky, but I still realize that some of the equipment does seem to genuinely work. So Roger died, and then we were at the cemetery, as I say, removing this potted rose plant, and Karen was videoing me, dealing with the stuff. And when we got home and looked at this video of removing this plant, then one strange thing was it was recorded on half speed, and Karen hadn't set that. So we thought, well, that's a bit odd. Didn't think a lot more about it, and I didn't notice anything for a while. But then a couple of weeks later, I was looking at this footage again and having a really, really good look this time, and I spotted all these little flies around this rose, and I thought, well, that's a bit odd, because I didn't notice loads of flies at the time when I was moving the plant. But anyway, on the video, there's loads of flies, dozens of flies, and some are like little black flying things with sort of maybe some sort of wings possibly flapping. And so some are black and some are white, and then often they'll be moving around, and they'll suddenly go from black to white or white to black, and they'll suddenly appear and then suddenly disappear without trace. And you follow the footage, you zoom in on each one, and they're all, I could tell they weren't physical flies as far as I could see, and they seem to be coming into and out of the soil around the rose. And I did hear something about spirit flies, and I thought, well, perhaps that's what these are, but I couldn't find much about spirit flies. But I came to the conclusion that possibly each of these little flying things that I was certain wasn't a genuine physical fly was possibly an individual spirit. And I did wonder, could each one be a spirit of a relative or friend, who's come for Roger before his funeral, to welcome him to the afterlife. So that's what I concluded. So that was a strange thing. So for the next few months, we were regularly at the cemetery, because we were planning what we would do with Joan and Roger's grave when Roger had been buried there. And we were looking at other graveyards around to get ideas, for how to do the grave. We were going to put some fencing around the grave when Roger had been buried there, and Joan and Roger were together. We were going to put some metal fencing around, so we were planning on what to do and what sort of fencing to use. And so we were forever at the cemeteries getting ideas and seeing how other people did their graves. And we would take our pet spaniel with us, Poppy, and she was an elderly dog and she couldn't walk very well. She actually had a stroke the day before Roger's funeral, and we thought that she might be going to die at the same time, and that was traumatic. But she pulled through and she lived for another 10 months, and some days she could walk, some days she couldn't. So some days we had her in a special pushchair. But we were regularly at the cemetery, and we would always film on the phone. And over the next few months, whenever I looked at the footage, I would see various light anomalies that I thought, yes, I think that's Roger. And there was one time we were at the cemetery actually at night after Roger had been buried there, and we went with Alison, Caroline's younger sister, their younger daughter, and while she was clearing out, Roger's house after he'd died and getting it ready to sell the house, there were so many things in the house, but in the garage there were all these old fireworks that were years old, and Alison suggested to Caroline and I, why don't we all go to the cemetery one night in the dark and let these fireworks off as a sort of tribute to Joan and Roger. So we did that, and we'd never thought of going to the cemetery at night because I think both Caroline and I thought, that could be a bit scary, a bit spooky, if you like, and thought, I'm not sure what this is going to turn out like. But we all went, Alison, her husband Colin, and Karen and I, and we had two of our grandchildren staying with us, so we took them as well, these two young boys, and it was actually really, really lovely. And we set these fireworks off, and I filmed it, and it was a beautiful experience actually. And when I looked at the footage later, all these various lights in the dark, then even taking into account, torchlight and lights on other people's graves and things and the fireworks, but nonetheless I could still see one or two anomalies that I thought, I think that could be an unexplained light anomaly, and maybe that's Roger. And subsequently I did sort of have it confirmed by him on the ghost hunting equipment I later got that Roger was there. He said one or two things on the special talking dictionary that I got that confirmed it was him, and that was amazing. So for the next 7 months after Roger had died, we would regularly film on the phones at the cemetery, and we would see things. And Caroline did actually film something at our own house that was amazing. And I'd redone out our spare bedroom, and we'd put a few of Roger's old bits of furniture in it, a television that he had, and a clock that his father had been presented with as a long service, token, from a job that he had. So we put that clock in the room, and one or two other things, his curtains, things like that. So Caroline was filming this room on video in order to show her best friend in Australia. She was showing her this room because she said, when you come and visit at some point, this is where you'll stay, and I'm just showing you the room that we've just done out. And she took these videos in this room to show her friend. And then when she looked at the video, she saw all these light anomalies in this bedroom in our house. And she showed me, and I was amazed. There were so many little white lights whizzing around the screen, literally dozens of the things at various points. And there was one amazing one of a bright white light dashing, flying rapidly across a mirror that was in the room that Caroline happened to be filming at that point. And so I was certain that, I didn't know if these were all Roger or not, but certainly some of them I thought probably were. And the one light anomaly that was so impressive, I had it on video, and I sort of slowed it down 10 times, which is as much as I could, and it was still moving quickly. And so I was able to then look at it frame by frame and just see, a few of the stills of it whizzing across the mirror, and it's quite an impressive thing. So for the next 7 months after Roger died, we'd been looking at stuff on the iPhone, and I was I was certain Roger was there, and he was giving us various light anomaly messages. And Caroline kept saying to me every so often, she said, "Why don't I get some ghost hunting equipment of my own?" And she thought I would enjoy using it. And I said, "Well, these ghost hunting programs, they scare me. You know, they're doing it at night, and you can have problems. You know, you can have evil spirits and attachments. And I really don't want all that. I just, you know, I could be asking for trouble if I were to get some." But she kept saying it, and then eventually I thought about it, and I said, "Okay, I might get some equipment, but if I do, I'm only going to be looking for your mum and dad as spirits on this equipment. I won't look for anyone else. I'm not looking for any other spirits of any sort, and I'll only film in the daytime, you know, in the light. I'm not doing it at night because I'm just not wanting to do that." And you know, it's possible we might see something, but I thought if we do get the equipment, then it's you know, it's a massive long shot. You know, what are the chances of seeing Joan and Roger on this equipment? You know, I thought it's going to be a long search, and I probably won't see them, but I'll get the best equipment, and if it doesn't work, I can sell it on again, and at least we've tried. But if I get cheap equipment, or, you know, duff things that aren't very good, then I'll never know, was it because the equipment wasn't good enough that we didn't see Joan and Roger, or was it just that they weren't there at all? So the first bit of equipment we got, actually, Roger died in April, and this was about November time, you know, 6-7 months later. The first bit of equipment I got was this K2 meter, which you might just see here, the thing with the flashing lights on the top. So this is a simple meter that a lot of ghost hunters use. It wasn't designed for ghost hunting. It was designed just to measure the electric field in a house or an office, and you'll turn it on, and when it's on, there's one green light which you'll see lit up all the time. And then if you get a stronger electric field, you know, above zero, then you've got various LEDs that light up right up to the red one. So when the red one lights, you've got a very strong electric field. And so these were designed for, say, checking your microwave on, or a bit of equipment in your house, you know, television or something. See if you've got a safe electric field around it, or if it's too high for safety of, you know, human beings to be within. And that's what these were designed for. But ghost hunters found that if a spirit's around, the spirit might make it read quite high. You know, it might have a strong electric field when there's a spirit nearby. So I got this as the first equipment. They're only cheap to buy, you know, £40 or so, $50 perhaps. But they are very effective, apparently, so I'd seen. So we got this and took it to the cemetery where Joan and Roger were, thinking that's where they would be. If they're going to be anywhere, they'll be at the cemetery where they were buried. So we took it and we turned it on at their grave, and their grave is a few hundred yards from the road. So the grave isn't near any electrical equipment of any sort. There's no electric lights in the cemetery or anything like that. Turned this thing on, and at the grave said, you know, "Roger, are you there?" And suddenly he's flashing this meter, you know, right up into the red, quite well, very strongly. And we seem to be able to have a conversation with him. So saying, "Roger, that's you, isn't it?" And he flashes the lights. And we film this on our phones while we're doing it, because having started filming on the iPhones, you know, taking video whenever we're somewhere, I wanted to carry that on, because I thought, you know, if anything does happen, I want to have a record of it, because I might want to refer back to it. So took video of this happening and saying, "Roger, you're there, aren't you?" And he flashes the lights, and I'm saying, that's you, Roger, the skeptic who doesn't believe in life after death. That's you, isn't it? And again, flashing the lights. So we're having a sort of a slightly light-hearted conversation, but I'm amazed at the way he's flashing this thing. So said to him, "Right, that's definitely you doing that." So Caroline has suggested I get some ghost hunting equipment. This is the first bit. And as you're so effective at operating this, then there's two more bits of kit I'm going to get. So one is this special SLS camera I've seen on ghost hunting programs, and it's a camera that can see, apparently, spirits, you know, invisible spirits. If it sees them, it might it'll recognize there's something there, and it'll superimpose a green stick figure on the screen of what it's looking at. And I said, these seem to work as far as I can tell. So going to get one of these, and then we might see you on screen as a spirit. And the other bit of equipment we're going to get is something called an Ovilus. The one I'm going to get is an Ovilus 3, which hadn't been made for some years, that it was obsolete. But as far as I could tell in the programs, it's the one that lots of ghost hunters use. It seemed to be very effective, and it's basically like a talking dictionary, effectively. There's over 2,000 words on its database, and a spirit can activate it somehow. Again, obviously, due to the spirit's electrical abilities, it can activate this thing, and it can come out with a word that's in the database. So it'll show the word on a little screen, and it'll talk the word in an old-fashioned computer voice. And I said, these really do seem to work. So if I get this, you might be able to talk to us, using this device. So we left it at that and ordered the stuff when we got home. And a couple of weeks later, the equipment arrived from America. So the first time I tried it out, I took the equipment. They both arrived on the same day, even though they were from different companies. I took them both to the cemetery by myself, but took our spaniel with us because Karen was working that day. It was just before Christmas 2022, December 2022. So I took the stuff to the cemetery, and it was a freezing cold day, way below freezing. And it was so cold, it was sort of slightly numbing, but I turned the equipment on at Joan and Roger's grave, and as soon as I started using this SLS camera, suddenly I can see, green stick figure spirit there, sort of by the grave. And I was amazed, and I said, Roger, that's you, isn't it? And I'm certain it was. And he did manage to operate the talking dictionary device, the Ovilus, and every so often he would say a word that seemed to be relevant, and I thought, yeah, I think he can use this. He is saying something. So I just couldn't believe it. So I had the equipment on for over 20 minutes, and Roger seemed to be there showing up as a stick figure for most of that time, and I just couldn't believe it. And as I said, I was filming. I was using my iPhone to film the equipment, so I had a record of everything. Eventually I said, Roger, I'm going to have to turn it off, and we're going to have to go home. It's so cold, that our elderly dog Poppy, she's just feeling the cold, and we can't sort of stay any longer. But I'm amazed at what you've done. And I said, we'll come back in a couple of days when Caroline's not working at the weekend, and I'll bring Caroline. I said, can you come back then, and maybe can you bring Joan with you? So there's both of you together. Left it at that. And so we left the cemetery, and I rang Karen and just told her what had happened. I was so emotional. I said, it's incredible. Your dad was there on camera. I can't believe it that he showed up straight away. And anyway, that evening I showed Karen the footage of what I'd filmed, and got Alison, her sister, and husband Colin to come around and showed them as well. And I was just so amazed. I really couldn't believe what had happened, how good it was. So I'm not sure if they fully believed it, but they seemed slightly impressed. And I'm not sure if Karen was totally convinced, but she seemed to be sort of slightly convinced. Karen's always been skeptical of this stuff, but she can be convinced. But I was never quite sure, did she fully believe this or not? But I totally believed it. So since Joan had died, I believed in the afterlife. I'm pretty sure Caroline did then. And seeing Roger now on this equipment, that was just the final bit of proof for me. And the thing is, Roger always loved electronic gadgets. He was into things like that. So it's entirely in keeping with his character that he would use electronic devices to communicate with us if that was possible. So I knew that was Roger, and I was so convinced it was him, and I was so impressed with what he was doing. So I was now sort of putting this special camera on quite often, perhaps a few times a week in the early days. And over the next year or more, even the next couple of years, I was putting it on an average of at least once a week, and I was saving all these videos. So every time I turned the camera on, Roger would show up on the camera, and I'd have some sort of record of what he was doing. So what I rapidly found was we didn't have to film at the cemetery. We could film at our own house, and Roger would be there. So I found actually that wherever I was and I put the camera on, Roger would show up. And over a period of time, I tried it in other places. Went to our daughter's house, 30 odd miles from where we lived, and we tried it there, and he did show up there. And eventually I got the help of a fantastic medium, and went to her house, and Roger was there. So I was taking all these videos and sort of accruing quite a sort of library of video of Roger on camera, and he was talking on this Ovilus, and every now and again he'd come out with a good word, but it's not like having a proper conversation with someone. It's just the occasional word that is totally relevant, but there are other words that you think, well, that's not relevant. I don't understand why he said that. Did he mean to say that word, or is that just an accident? So a few days after he died, probably a few days after I got the equipment, about a week after, just after that Christmas when we got the equipment initially, Alison came to our house. I think it was New Year's Day or something. She and Colin called in, and I said, right, I'm going to turn this equipment on to show you it, in person, the equipment, and we'll see if your dad shows up. So we'd had a meal and they were still at the table, and I turned the equipment on in our kitchen dining room, and I'm looking around with the camera, and then I see a spirit, and I said, oh, Alison, your dad's here, do you want to come and meet him? And sometimes on camera it looks like the spirit is possibly holding out their hand, their stick figure hand. They're perhaps holding it out, and it looks like they can maybe touch a living human being's hand. And I was never sure, is this really what's happening or not? But anyway, on camera, Alison's there, and she holds out her hand, and I said to Alison, your dad's here just at this point in the room. You hold out your hand, see if your dad will touch your hand, and you might just feel something, because sometimes people think if there's a spirit around, you can actually feel a slight prickliness, a bit like the static on a charged balloon or something like that. You can just feel a gentle tingling maybe. So Alison holds out her hand, and her dad appears to put his hand out to touch her hand, as if they're shaking hands almost. And I'm saying to Roger, I've got the talking dictionary on, and I said, can you say something, Roger, to acknowledge that it's you, that it's you on screen that we're seeing? And suddenly at that point, just as I had asked him that, he says the word alley on the screen, which is Alley. Now, Roger always called Alison Ali. He never called her Alison. He always said Ali, but the way he spelled Ali would be A-L-I. Well, in this dictionary database, there isn't the word Alison in there, the name Alison, and there isn't the name Ali, A-L-I, but there is A-L-L-E-Y. So I knew that was definitely Roger using the only word that he could use that to him, confirmed to us that it's him there on camera. So he says Ali instantly as I asked for proof that that's him. So that's an amazing bit of proof, and he has done this a number of times with this Ovilus. He's come out with a word that is absolutely the right word. And there was one time he came out with the word, I was asking him something, and he came out with the word board, B-O-A-R-D, and I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. I don't know why he's saying that. And it was literally a year later when I was going through all my videos and I was looking at this footage again, I realized what he meant. So this was a time when I was filming and I was asking him where he was, and he said bored, and I realized what he meant was he was by the skirting board, which is the wooden board at the bottom of a wall where it meets the floor. And I think in America you don't have that term, do you? You don't use skirting board, but in England that's what it's
Yeah.
called.
Okay.
That was Roger saying I'm by the skirting board, and it took me so long to realize what he was saying. So anyway, I'm amassing all these videos, and they're all incredible. And I thought, well, what do I do now? I'd show one or two people these videos, and they were slightly interested, but they weren't sort of overwhelmed. They weren't sort of amazed as I was, and I rapidly realized I'm going to have to write a book about all this. I've never written a book in my life before, and I'd never thought I ever would. But Roger, being a book fanatic, and books were one of his main things, as I've already said, I realized that Roger and Joan's story needed to be told in a book, and I basically realized that Roger was trying to get me to write this book, and I just felt that that's what he wants, and so that's what I started to do. So I knew that the talking dictionary, as I say, you couldn't have a proper conversation with Roger on that, and I rapidly realized I needed help. I realized that I needed some mediums, a medium or more than one perhaps, to help me to have a proper talk with Roger and Joan, hopefully. And so I started contacting some mediums soon after I started using this equipment, and I said, to the mediums, would you be able to help me to, give us a one-to-one reading perhaps with Roger, and while I've got the equipment on, and see if we can have some sort of chat with him effectively. And a number of mediums actually were very negative and said, no, you shouldn't be doing this. You might actually be causing Joan and Roger serious problems. You might trap them here on Earth, and they'll become trapped spirits. And I had read this sort of thing, that's possible. I thought, blimey, I really don't want to cause them any harm, and that's the last thing I want to do. And is that really the case? But so I was a bit scared of what they were telling me, and I thought, do I stop using equipment or what? But anyway, luckily, there were other mediums who were very positive. So the first lovely medium who was so positive, she was comparatively local to us in Yorkshire. She lived about 20 odd miles away, and her name's Ali Mather. Anyway, this book that I ended up writing, she's got a whole chapter in that. So she was the first medium who was really helpful. She is familiar with all this equipment. She uses it herself sometimes with ghost hunting that she does, but she's an amazing medium as well. And she said, yeah, I'll help you. And we arranged to go over to her house with the equipment, Karen and I. And the plan was, we'd have a reading. Hopefully Roger would come through, and she would tell us whatever he was telling us, and we would have the equipment on at the same time and see if he was showing up there as a spirit. So we did that, and Roger was there. So turned it on in her room where we were going to have the meeting, and she was making some coffees in another room. So Roger's there showing up as a spirit all the time until she comes in the room, and then suddenly when she comes in the room, then Roger seems to disappear into her. And I said, oh, Ali, Roger was here, but as you came in the room, suddenly he's disappeared. He's gone into you. And she said, actually, that's a good thing. That means that he's sort of blended with me, and that means that hopefully I'll get a better message from him, which is what happened. So she came out with this reading from Roger, and she got virtually everything right, especially all his complicated health issues. She picked up on all those, and it was an amazing reading. So, and it was Ali Mather actually who inspired me to write and complete this book. So I said, I'm thinking of writing a book about Joan and Roger, and this was at the point when I was just starting to start writing the thing. But I was, as I got going, I sort of found it hard, and I wasn't quite sure that it was working, and I was sort of, with all the work involved, I was not sure, is this going to work? Is it the right thing to do? And how am I going to deal with all the pictures and stuff, in a book? Because Roger's story seems to be so much about the video that we've been taking. And Ali Mather said to me, you know, you're going to do it. I can see that you're going to do this book. And she really convinced me, and she motivated me, and she sent me an amazing video to watch called The Secret, and it's about visualizing your sort of what you want to achieve, and if you visualize it enough and really imagine that you will succeed, then you will. And it was a bit like a sort of a sales video. It was a bit strange. I hadn't seen anything like that before, but it did inspire me, and I sort of kept Ali's sort of message to me in my head all the time, you know, just think of how this book will eventually get published. And so that did inspire me. So I've got Ali to thank for all this with the book, even though I did have, you know, a major problem with the book later on. You know, I'd written a few chapters, first 3 I think it was, and then I thought, this isn't really very good, it's not really working, and I'm not convinced it's going to work, and I still didn't know how to deal with the pictures. And it was at this point that Caroline's best friend in Australia, who actually is an English teacher, she offered to edit my book for me, you know, once I got going, and she inspired me to keep going as well. So she looked at what I'd written so far, because I was thinking of maybe giving up, or I couldn't see how to carry on, and she said, no, what you've written is actually good, I can do something with that. And she inspired me. She came over to see us by herself one time in England, and she stayed with us for a while, and we had a lot of good chats about all sorts of things, spiritual and otherwise. And she looked at my book and gave me some ideas. And so that was at the beginning of our summer holidays, actually. She went home to Australia, and I spent the rest of our summer holidays, because my job, part-time job as a school bus driver, which Caroline now does as well, then it means we get school holidays, so, which I love. And it meant I had the time and energy to do all the things relating to the book. So I spent the rest of the summer holiday writing the rest of the book, and basically completed it. And Caroline had found, just by chance, a publisher that she thought might be suitable for the book. So once the book was finished and Joe had edited it, sent it to this publisher, and amazingly they offered us a deal, you know, straight off, and offered to publish the book. And they're a publisher that deals in spiritual and paranormal books. So I was so amazed. And by this point I'd actually changed my plans with the book, and I'd finished writing it, and I'd decided that to incorporate all the video, I was going to use a QR code on the book front cover, and from that QR code people can, using their smartphone, they can access all the videos that are associated with the book. So each chapter in the book has a particular video that it's describing, and the text describes what you're seeing in the video, and then you can, using the QR code or other methods, you can get access to our video channel and see this video and see what's actually happening. So in the end, that's how it was, and it's turned out really well. So this book is published at the end of April, beginning of May, and it's actually available now to pre-order on Amazon. So if you search Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife, that's the name of the book, then you'll see this book, and you can look at it, all the details. There's a lot of sample text. You'll see all the chapters that are in it, and there's a picture of the front cover, which is the front cover that it's going to have. You'll see the QR code on the Amazon listing, and that actually works. If you use your phone now, you can look at the videos associated with it. And as I say, this book will be out shortly, and if you do pre-order, there's no charge until they send it to you. And it's just incredible how all this has worked out. So Joan and Roger have just proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that there is an afterlife, that they are around us. And there's 3 mediums in the book. There's Ali Mather, the first one, who helped us. There's Stephen Holbrook, who Roger came through with a message from 3 weeks after he'd died. Stephen Holbrook only does public performances, shows. He doesn't do one-to-ones, and he wouldn't do a one-to-one for me when I asked him at the time. But that doesn't matter. He's been so helpful. So he's got a chapter in the book. He invited us to use the equipment at one of his shows to film with the special camera, which I did. And we did see spirits there. And one of them, Karen is certain, was her dad, Roger. So at a Stephen Holbrook show, he has a break in the middle of his show, an interval. And he says to the audience, I've got some books here of my own, books that have been written about Stephen Holbrook. And he's saying, if you want, you can come up and buy a book. And at this point, Roger is there as a spirit on camera, sort of pointing at the books, it looks like. And because he was such a book fanatic, then that would be Roger. So Karen is certain that's him. And then there's a third medium, Liz Murphy. She's an American medium, and she's so amazing. And it's incredible how Karen got to hear about her. So Karen was buying some knitting patterns or something on eBay, I think it was. And
Right.
she's buying them from this woman in America who was Liz Murphy, knitting. And then suddenly Karen gets a message from Liz Murphy, an email, a few weeks later saying, I'm not doing the knitting anymore. I'm becoming a medium, and I'm going to be doing that, setting up a business, doing that professionally. And if you want, you can have a free reading. So Karen was wanting to do this, so she took her up on that offer, and we had the reading with Liz Murphy, on a video call, and it was good. But Karen hadn't told Liz that we were going to use the equipment, because Karen thought if I tell her, she might not do the reading and nothing might happen anyway. So we had the equipment on, and it was quite a good reading, but it didn't go quite right. And we told Liz after the event that we'd had the equipment on with her reading, and she was really upset about this. And I can understand why. I said to Karen, should you tell her? But we didn't, and we upset her. So for a while, for many months, she didn't want to talk to us, and I understand why. And I had a plan in my mind to help the book, that I was going to get a top American medium who I thought would be really good. I was going to get her to do a read, and I thought if that works well and we've got the equipment on, then that's going to help with the book, with everything, publicity and what have you. So we got this top American medium eventually to do a reading, and it was a total disaster. It wasn't Roger or Joan that she was talking about. It could have been anyone, and there was nothing particular, and it was expensive, and it was from our point of view, a disaster. And we had told her we were going to use the equipment, but I don't know if she hadn't listened or what, but she was very upset with us using the equipment and got very stroppy. So we went back to this first American medium, Liz Murphy, and said, we had this other famous American medium and it didn't work. And I'm so sorry that we didn't tell you initially we were going to use the equipment. Would you, forgive us and try again maybe? And she came round and she was very good, and she was lovely. So we had a second reading like a year later after the first one with her. And this second reading, it was amazing. And Karen's mum came through strongly, and her dad as well. But her mum's reading was so spot on. Liz Murphy got her mum exactly right. She's saying things like, I can see your mum with lots of children. Did she have lots of children? And Karen saying, no, she didn't. There's just the two of us, my sister Alison and myself. And then suddenly Karen realised, she said, oh, my mum worked with young children. She was a nursery, nurse effectively, and she loved children and got on so well with them. So all these things Liz Murphy was saying were absolutely spot on. And she was saying things like, to Caroline, Liz Murphy was saying, would you say your dad was a bit selfish? It's all about me, me, me. And I said, yes, that's exactly right. And she came out with all these things that are so spot on. So Liz Murphy's got a chapter in the book as well. And so all these three mediums were amazing. And the one thing I knew I needed for a book to convince people, I needed scientific proof that this was spirits we were seeing on this special camera. And I told Ali Mather at the beginning of the first meeting, who was so helpful, I said, for this book, I'm going to need scientific validation that these are spirits on camera. And I'd already tried to find some suitable scientists to do this, and I'd contacted Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who's a very famous English biologist author, and he's got some really amazing ideas on things like ESP and everything to do with how animals are able to communicate telepathically and all that sort of thing. He's done all sorts of very detailed scientific experiments that have been validated by other scientists and prove that ESP, all that sort of thing is real, it's genuine. And so I'd contacted Rupert Sheldrake. I said, would you be able to somehow, seeing the videos that I've shown you of Roger on camera, could you somehow validate that really is Roger on camera? He said, no, that's not what I do, that's not what I'm about. And I said, well, do you know anyone that is, any organization or whatever? And he put me on to the Society for Psychical Research, who are the oldest organization in the world, that was set up in the 1800s. They were set up to look for proof of life after death. And they come at this from a scientific angle. So they'll investigate things, sort of hauntings or poltergeists, whatever, and they will investigate. And if they rule out all supposedly ordinary explanations, then they'll conclude maybe it is something paranormal or whatever. So I was put onto these people, and eventually, after a long process, getting put from one person onto another, eventually I spoke to someone who seemed to be quite helpful, and eventually they said there's someone who would be interested in coming up to see us, to meet us and see the evidence we've got. But normally they investigate in pairs. There's 2 investigators to be a proper investigation, but we could only find this one chap, Aaron Lomas, and he wasn't able to find any colleague who was available or who could come up for whatever reason. So in the end, I persuaded Aaron to come up by himself to investigate Roger, which he did. He came up to us for the weekend and saw all the videos, and he was taking all his notes and measurements, and he's very meticulous, in the way he's been trained. And he was a PhD parapsychology student at Northampton University in the UK, which seems to be a centre for all this sort of thing. But he was a member of the Society for Psychical Research, and he was on the Spontaneous Cases Committee, which is the committee that looks into these events that people want investigating. So he came up to us, and he was sort of quite impressed, but he didn't conclude that it was Roger or a spirit on the camera. As you can see on this screen here from the SLS camera, when it's in our house, it's looking, and we've got patterned wallpaper, we've got furniture all over the place. So skeptics say these cameras are just being fooled into thinking there's something there. It puts a stick figure on when really it's just looking at things in the room and being fooled, and so it's not really a spirit. So I think this was Aaron's, possibly his conclusion. He wasn't convinced because of all the stuff in our house. So when we saw spirits, what we thought were spirits, he was thinking, well, it might just be the camera can't cope with all the stuff in our house. So I kept saying to him over the next year or more, I said, what would it take for you to be convinced that this camera really is seeing a spirit, and it's not just being tricked into thinking there's a spirit there when there's not really? And he said, well, if we saw a spirit showing up on the camera in a totally neutral environment, like a plain white room or something like that, with no pattern to the wall, just pure white, then that would convince me. So I kept pushing him, and eventually he said, okay, I'll book a room at Northampton University over the Easter holidays, which were coming up, and we'll do some experiments there. So I said, yeah, that's perfect. And by this stage, I'd already sent him an SLS camera of his own to assess, because he'd heard of the cameras, but he wasn't totally familiar with them. So with the one I sent him, he was able to do all sorts of experiments prior to us meeting, and he became familiar with how they worked, what they did, what they could do, all the various adjustments that they've got, which I've never touched. I just used them straight out the box. So anyway, this day came over the Easter holidays, and we went down. We had this room, and so we each had our own camera. Aaron had his, and I had mine. So we had a whole load of tests planned that we'd do with two cameras side by side and see if they're seeing the same things and all sorts of things. I'm not sure what it was he was planning to do, but I just went with whatever it was and said, fine, yeah, you say, and we'll do the things. And so he was sat at a table and he was writing his notes, as he always does. And I said, you carry on doing that. And I said, I'll turn my camera on and I'll look around the room to see if Roger's come, because I've asked him to come, and I'm sure he will if he can. So this university was about 150 miles from where I lived, but as I said, Roger turns up wherever I've got the camera, so I knew he would show up if he could. And so I've got my camera on, I'm looking around the room, Aaron's writing his notes for the whole load of experiments we were doing. And after maybe 30 minutes, Roger still hadn't shown up, and I'm starting to get a bit worried. I'm thinking, oh, good grief, maybe he can't come here, maybe he can't show up for whatever reason. And I was saying, Roger, I really want you to show up, because I want the SPR to confirm it's a spirit we're seeing, and we need this really for the book, to confirm that scientists agree that this camera is seeing a spirit. And otherwise, if we don't have this validation, this book is just going to be yet another book, and people aren't going to be convinced. So anyway, I decided to turn the computer that's part of the camera setup, I turn that off and restart it, because as always, computers can go slightly wrong, and you need to reset them, restart them. So I did this, and then within a minute or two, suddenly I can see a stick figure showing up on the plain white wall. So I say to Aaron, right, you stay sitting, at your table, don't move, because sometimes if you walk in front of the spirit on camera, the spirit can disappear, and I think that's just the camera. It's a really complicated device with a very sophisticated software, and it might lose track of the spirit, and it might take a while to re-establish and see the spirit again. Or maybe, if it was Roger, maybe he sort of gets bored and disappears or whatever. So I said to Aaron, you stay there, you keep doing that, and I'll keep filming while the spirit's showing. And then when the spirit goes, then I'll show you the video. So anyway, for a few minutes, there's this stick figure showing up on the wall next to Aaron. And I said to Aaron, right, anything more you need me to do to be convinced that this is a spirit? And he said, no, that's it, that's it. So basically we'd proved that it was a spirit on camera, and the scientist had confirmed that. So that was everything I needed. So again, in the book, there's a chapter on the Society for Psychical Research and Aaron Lomas, who investigated and confirmed that, yes, that is a spirit on camera. And I knew that spirit was Roger. So we got everything we needed for the book. And so the way I see it, Joan and Roger have proved beyond doubt that there is life after death, and they're showing us on camera. And as with many people, if I see it with my own eyes, then I'll believe it. So what Joan and Roger have done is so amazing. So Roger the skeptic has proved there's life after death, and is basically telling everyone, I was wrong. There is an afterlife, and here I am, and you can see me. And what more proof do you need? So I'm totally convinced. So what Joan started and Roger carried on in the afterlife with all the various signs, they've just proved beyond doubt there is afterlife, that all the major religions are right, that we do survive after our physical body dies. And even though it's an incredible thing that's beyond many people's imagination to believe that there is afterlife, it's true. And incredibly, Joan and Roger have got the same personalities as spirits as they had as humans. It's just they've got no physical body. So Roger would like his electronic gadgets. So even though this is a serious book about proof of afterlife, it took ghost hunting equipment that some people might think is gadgety. It took that for Roger to be able to show up to people and prove that he's there. So he's just proved beyond doubt that there's afterlife, and afterlife, is all around us. So from what I've read in numerous books by mediums and others, experts in this field, that spirits can freely come and go. So wherever they are most of the time, I'm not sure, but they can be all around us. They can be right next to us, and we don't know they're there, but they are watching and guiding us and helping us. And from their vantage point, Roger, along with all his various spirit helpers, whoever these people are, and Ali Mather, the medium, has said he's got, we've got a whole load of spirit guides, and they're all helping with doing this book, organizing it and pulling all the strings, and everything's really clicking into place. So it's not all my doing. My name's on the book front cover. I had wanted Roger to be there as co-author, but Caroline's sister Alison didn't want that, even though she was happy with everything else about the book, which is amazing. But my name's on the book cover, but there's a whole team behind me. And obviously Joan and Roger are two of the most important people within that team. But between us all, we've all managed to get their proof down in a book and on video, which anyone can watch. And there you have it. So if anyone's interested, then, as I say, the book is available now to pre-order on Amazon and anywhere that sells books. So it's Joan and Roger, Alive in the Afterlife. And if you want our website, where there's all sorts of information and links to other things, the website is aliveintheafterlife.co.uk, and we're on Facebook and we're on Instagram, and all the links are there on the website. So I think we've come to the end of the story from my point of view. So thanks ever so much for listening while I sort of just talk endlessly about it. It's just so amazing.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a follow-up there. I mean, obviously you mentioned that you didn't want to kind of turn into like a ghost hunter and go looking for ghosts, things like that. But I mean, obviously you wanted to kind of look into this further because, it's your in-laws, and obviously your wife wanted that as well because they're her parents. Obviously my mom died a long time ago when I was 1999. So I was about 11 years old, I think. So, I didn't really have any time with her, really, obviously. I was real young when that happened. You want your parents with you. You want to know what happens to them and all that kind of stuff. You wish you had more time, whatever. You want to reach out to them. But same token, I think you kind of got into that a little bit earlier as well. I mean, there's always a fear of, because you want it to be true so bad that, it might be a ghost with ill intentions, maybe a demon coming through, tricking, stuff like that. I mean, did that ever seriously cross your mind as well? Because that's always something that, happens. Somebody dies suddenly, their loved ones want them to come back, or they want to speak with them, and what they get in actuality is some kind of demon that's actually pretending to be them. I mean, did that ever kind of cross your mind early on?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I was so reluctant to get ghost hunting equipment. When Caroline was saying, why don't I get some? I was aware of all the bad things that can happen, and I've read about it. And I believe that's true. People can get evil spirits and attachments. And, that's something that some of the mediums warned me about. They said, you can be attracting all sorts of problems, and you can, as I say, cause Joan and Roger problems. So I was very worried about all the bad stuff. But as I said to Caroline, I said, I'll get the equipment, but I'll only ever try and search for Joan and Roger, your mum and dad. I won't try and look for anything else. I won't do general ghost hunting because I knew I could have problems there. And with my childhood that had been scary, with nightmares and all sorts of things when I was young, I was scared of the thought of ghosts, and I didn't want any of that. And I've heard of other people who had all sorts of terrible stuff. So I was really scared. But the way it's worked out for us is we've just had nothing but lovely stories, evidence from Joan and Roger, and it's all been so reassuring and comforting. There's never been anything frightening, and the book is all totally positive and uplifting. And I think anyone who's got any doubt, it'll help to convince them. Maybe people who aren't sure about life after death. That's what the book is for, and that's what Joan and Roger are aiming at. And it's all, as I say, it's all positive and it's happy. There are just some sad bits, obviously, when people die in the book, which is inevitable, and that's where there's love. You inevitably get sadness when someone dies, and that's the thing that I find hard to reconcile. We know there's afterlife. We've seen the proof, and we know that's a fact now. But even so, when a human physically dies, you still are overwhelmed with grief, even though you know now that they do live forever. And that was, in fact, the case with our pet spaniel, who's got her own chapter in the book. She was so important to us, as anyone that reads the book will find out why. And it was actually harder when she died, to be honest, than when Joan or Roger died. Really, it was certainly equally hard, if not harder. And animals have spirits as well, and many animal owners will be well aware that animals are as important to us as people are. And when they die, it's just as devastating, if not more so, as when a human dies. But yeah, there's plenty of scope for evil attachments and that. And ghost hunting, to me, all the programs are gimmicky, and a lot of them, not all the programs, but most of them are gimmicky. There are some very good ones that I love, and I respect the people who have the right attitude. They're very sort of aware of the spirits, that they're real people, but they don't have a body. But some of these ghost hunting programs, they just seem to be provoking spirits, and that is inviting all sorts of evil, isn't it? And people need to steer clear of anything that could invite evil spirits. But if you just have all the right intentions and you're positive, and you just invite the good spirits to make contact with you, apparently that works, and you won't get the evil. And that's what we've experienced. We've had nothing evil, nothing frightening whatsoever. Although Joan and Roger, we know in our house, when they want to be, when we need them, perhaps, I don't know. And when we've got the camera on, very often they're there, although they're not here tonight on camera. But it's just the way it goes. You obviously can't predict what they're going to do. But yeah, if you just have good intentions, then you will have good experiences. That's what I read, and that's certainly been the case with us, and I believe that's absolutely right. So everything to do with them has been good. They wouldn't want to scare us, and that makes sense, doesn't it? Our relatives aren't going to want to frighten us. Why would they? So maybe they might make a noise to show that they're there, but they're not going to frighten us. And we've taken it like that. So any signs we've had, we've known that's a positive, good thing. It's reassuring for us, and we love it. And they know that we wouldn't want any sort of terrible things to happen while they're showing us that they're there. So people can be comforted that if they go with the right intentions, then good things will happen. So anyone who's interested in doing anything similar, then there's loads of things in the book. We've got a chapter on all the equipment that we used, and they can read that. But if you read books by any mediums or anyone in this field, they all have the same message, basically. Go with good intentions, and you won't have any evil come to you. And the medium Stephen Holbrook, who's been so good for us, he doesn't believe in evil spirits. He's obviously not encountered it, and everything he gets, all the messages from past family members who come through at his shows, and he gets perhaps a dozen very positive readings on an evening when he's performing, and everyone you can see is overwhelmed because it's definitely their relative. Their messages are so accurate, and he gets nothing but good, positive messages. And I think that's it. If you go in with a positive frame of mind, and you just invite in positive people to come through to, you know, past relatives or whatever, then that's what will happen. So don't invite anything bad into your life, and then you shouldn't have any bad happen to you. So yeah, it's something I was totally aware of and I was scared of, but the way it's panned out, you know, it's been nothing but fantastic. It's just awe-inspiring. And Joan and Roger, you know, I'm just so amazed. And part of me thinks, you know, why didn't my parents come through with these signs? But this is how it is. So don't question it too much. This is how our life has gone, and I'm just so happy it has. You know, we got to our 50s and 60s before Joan and Roger showed themselves like this, and this is how it's just meant to be. And I'm just so impressed. I'm so in awe of what they've done. And as I say, that between us all as a team, we're sort of telling others, you know, this afterlife is real and it's actually on camera effectively. And as I say, skeptics will say, well, that camera's not seeing spirits, but it is. We've had the scientific validation, and how else can a camera show invisible spirits? Because spirits are invisible, and as you said earlier, you know, they are a form of energy of some type. We don't fully understand, do we, what spirits are? But they've got some affinity with electricity, you know, and they can certainly activate electronics and electrical stuff. So I don't know how they do it and how it all is, but it's definitely true. And this camera really does see an invisible spirit, and it knows that they're there. And we've had it confirmed by the mediums and the equipment. Yeah, that is a spirit, and I know it's Joan and Roger. So yeah, it's all positive. So people shouldn't be frightened. If you're going with the right intentions, then things will be positive and good.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, so we'll have obviously link to the book and the show notes as well for everybody. Sir, we'll let you go ahead and get some sleep now. I know it's coming up on 3 a.m. out there, so we don't want to keep you too long. We appreciate your time. But yeah, I guess, is there any, I mean, besides the book, do you guys have any kind of social medias that people can go to, or is it just kind of book? And
yeah, we've got, as I say, we've got the website aliveintheafterlife.co.uk, and from that people can get to all our other things. But we've got, we're on Facebook, so that's Alive in the Afterlife. We're on YouTube, as I say, via that QR code, and if you want to go direct, it's the YouTube channel is at Joan and Roger Afterlife, and Instagram with Spirit Greeter. So to be honest, my wife Caroline, she does all the social media, so she's the one that keeps on top of that. To me, it's another thing I just don't understand it, but she does all that. So I just do the equipment, and I see Joan and Roger have mum and dad, but she does all the background work. So, but it's there. So yeah, go to the website as a first port of call, maybe aliveintheafterlife.co.uk, and from there anyone can get onto all our other things, you know, on the other social media. So,
all right, so we'll do that there. Yes, it was okay. I see it now. Yes, we'll have links to everything there as well. Show notes, like you mentioned, Facebook, website, link to the book as well. So we'll be looking out for that. Yeah, sir. So I really appreciate it. You know, like I mentioned, we appreciate you staying up late for us. So you're Friday morning, we're late Thursday night here. So appreciate the time.
It's been great. Yeah, thanks ever so much for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed being on your live show and talking to all your fantastic listeners and followers. It's just been great. So thanks so much for this opportunity. I've just really appreciate you talking to me and just letting me talk almost non-stop on your show.
But, yeah, that's what we're here for. Yeah, it's there's only so much that I can ask. I just kind of let everybody go, you know, hey, this show starts, you're here, and let's see what you're about. So we let everybody roll on as much as they can, and then, you know, we're just sitting here. So it's great.
Appreciate that. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll be looking out for the book there. Like I mentioned before, we'll have the link to the website, book, Facebook, all that stuff in the show notes down below for everybody to pick up. They can check it out as well. But yeah, we'll be keeping an eye out for that book, and hopefully everybody go ahead and go on over and check that out as well. So I really appreciate your time. Take care of yourself out there, and hopefully this isn't the last book you write. Hopefully you get into something else as well, maybe something down the line, and who knows, we'll have you back on again.
That's great. Thanks ever so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a great night. Get some sleep.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye. Bye.
All right, everybody. I appreciate that. Everybody's hanging out as well on a Thursday. Yeah, so 2:00 in the morning out there, going on 3:00 in the UK. So appreciate his time. A couple of things here. Our main thing here. So we'll take a look at this comment here, just to kind of clarify a few things. Yeah, it says, your shirt says Christ is King, then why are you dabbling in this dribble? I understand where that's coming from. I get it. As a Catholic, I don't necessarily believe, or not necessarily, I don't believe in, kind of people being able to come back and, people being able to speak to their dead relatives and all that kind of stuff. I don't personally believe in that. But that doesn't mean that we bring people on to the show and shit on their beliefs. Excuse my language. It's not what we're doing. Like, I'm not going to bring them on here and just be like, oh, that's not true, and here's why. And, hey, people believe what they believe. He obviously mentioned that he's not, or he wasn't very spiritual. His in-laws weren't very spiritual, didn't believe anything, didn't have a religion, all that kind of stuff. Hey, that's, everybody's free to believe in whatever they want to believe in. And I'm here to have the conversation, see people's different views and all that kind of stuff, what they believe in. That's their deal, right? I don't believe in a lot of things. Doesn't mean I'm not going to have all these people on the show to speak about it. I mean, what kind of Mickey Mouse third grade, mentality is that? I don't. A lot of people don't believe in a lot of things other people believe in. That's why we're kind of in the way that we are nowadays in the world. I'm not gonna just other somebody and not speak with them. That's childish behavior. So yeah, I mean, I think I thought the topic was interesting. Kind of read snippets of the book here and there. I'm always interested in listening to what people think and what they believe in, and how that affects their lives. So I'm going to do it. I mean, I'm just here to have the conversation. If you don't like it, don't watch. Simple as that. I don't know what to tell everybody. I don't believe in that kind of stuff personally, and never will. I don't believe that we can speak to our relatives after death and all that kind of stuff. But that's, like I mentioned, I'm not going to not have people on the show that do. We're just here to have the conversation, and that's it. If you don't like it, hey, you ain't got to click on the show. You ain't got to be here to listen to the whole thing. Free will. Everybody's free to do whatever they want. But yeah, I appreciate everybody stopping in on Thursday. We'll be back with a few more shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. But as always, guys, if you guys are new, you want to check us out on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Please consider hitting that subscribe button as well. A lot of the people that stop by the show aren't subscribers, and we can see that in the metrics. Hit that like button, smash that bell icon as well. You guys will miss an episode in the future, whether it's live or recorded. Questions for myself or our guests, as well as guest or topic recommendations, shoot us an email at thetruthfender1776@gmail.com. Check us out on X, Kick, Instagram, Rumble, all that good stuff. And as always, appreciate the Spiritual Awakening International Group for making us an affiliate. We really appreciate you guys having us on. Yeah, check out Jeremy's book and everything. It's going to be in the show notes for everybody. Stop by, go ahead and pre-order that. Check out the website, Facebook, and all that. Show them some love. Appreciate everybody. We'll see you guys back another episode. Take care. Have a great weekend. Happy Friday. Stay safe out there, everybody. Stay blessed. And always remember God, family, Texas.